Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, FromTheShadowsPodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram at From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started. Ladies and gentlemen, so without further delay, here is your host, Shane Grove.
Hey everyone, it's Shane Grove, host of the From the Shadows podcast. We are putting together a Patreon page for From the Shadows podcast listeners. And what a Patreon page is there's different levels of patronage that you guys can sign up for if you choose to. What it does is it helps us with a little bit of support from you guys. Keep doing what we're doing, buy some new equipment, make sure that we can keep everything running and sounding good or much better, let's hope. But with that, there's lots of unique gifts and rewards and merchandise that's available by being a Patreon, including a special episode each month by the judge, another special episode every month by the Ozark Howler, and at least one listener episode where we take a story from one of our listeners and share it with everybody. So we will have the information out about that on our Facebook pages, After the Shadows, and the From the Shadows podcast page, as well as our Instagram account. We'll tell everybody how they can find that and become a Patreon of the show. And we certainly appreciate all the support our listeners have given us.
Hey, welcome everyone to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and this morning, despite some technical troubles, I will still label him the super producer, Jason. What's happening, Jason?
Greetings, everybody. We're doing fine this rainy morning.
We're doing fine this rainy morning, yeah. Because, hey, by the time this episode comes out here in Ohio, it may be snowing. So,
it's a possibility. This is Ohio,
so
yes.
We'll take the rain. We'll take the rain. So, we have kind of a special episode today, and so how do I want to frame this? Because Jason and the judge, who's not with us today because he's actually probably doing some judge work, however we want to frame that too. Jason, does he really work, or is he just?
Well, he does for a portion of his time. Put it that way.
Okay. Because we know from our interaction and that we have some highly intelligent listeners out there for the most part.
Indeed, we do. Indeed.
As a highbrow paranormal show. So we know our listeners love everything there is to know about the paranormal. They live it. They listen to it. They want to consume everything and at a high level. So in order to class up the joint, we have brought in the host of one of my favorite podcasts. It's called the Writewaypodcast. And these guys are authors, screenwriters, movers and shakers in the literary world. If you are an aspiring writer out there in the From the Shadows podcast listener pool, these are the guys you know, once you listen to this episode, you're going to want to go look these guys up, and they can tell you everything there is to know about writing a bestseller, writing a great movie, and they're very entertaining while they do it. So let me introduce the founder and CEO and best-selling author, and I'm going to say best-selling author, even though I know from listening to them, I know there's varying degrees of best-selling authors. Rea Fry. Rea, how you doing today?
I am doing well. Thanks for having us.
And our other guest is the humble and very understated, but supremely talented Joe Tower, who, by the way, is even more famous than I thought because of the way he screens his phone calls. It's like 4 times. So Joe,
lock it down. I gotta keep it on lockdown. I'm really good. Thank you guys for having us on.
We were so glad to have you guys on. And so the idea was, and I threw this out to Rea, is because we have great listeners who love the paranormal and horror and stuff like that, we wanted to pick you guys' brains because you guys are the literary experts and kind of do an episode where you guys told our listeners and us about some of the really great fiction, science fiction, horror books that are out there that our listeners may want to go check out, especially since we're coming up on the holiday season. Maybe they can ask them for gifts, give them as gifts to the other creepy people in their life. Not to sound ridiculous, but I mean, so we just kind of wanted to see what you guys had to say about the science fiction horror genre that's going on that people might miss, because we do have a lot of authors on here, but they're authors that are writing real story, like eyewitness stories. They're
absolutely. Oh, let's not even get into true crime, because that's our other.
No, I know, that's a whole other passion. Yeah.
True crime.
I mean, that is. We want to have a true crime podcast at some point. I was a journalist on death row and worked with tons of people that are, convicted murderers and convicted felons, and I think I was a prisoner in another life or something.
Holy smokes! No, wait a second.
There we go. There's your paranormal confession right there.
There you go.
That's right. Past life regressions right here.
And it's funny you say that. Like, one of my favorite stories is based. We're near Mansfield, Ohio. Jason's actually in Mansfield, Ohio, and that's the site where they filmed Shawshank Redemption. We just filmed the movie that's coming out, Escape from Death Block 13, all filmed in the prison there. And one of my favorite stories, and it has been, is the Lester Eubanks story. Are you familiar with the Lester Eubanks story?
No.
His name sounds familiar, but yes.
Lester Eubanks in the 60s was a medic in the Vietnam War, and he got discharged or whatever and came back to Mansfield, Ohio, and ended up killing a young girl. And I mean, got convicted, sent to prison, life. I think he got sentenced to death. Okay. So in the early 70s, then when the death sentences were kind of rolled back and everybody just got put on death or life in prison. He then in the early 70s now fancy how crazy this is. A convicted murderer of a child got sent to the mall in Columbus, Ohio at Christmas time to buy Christmas gifts. Yes. He got dropped off by the corrections office, given like an hour or 2 hours to go into the mall at Christmas time to buy gifts for the warden and some of the other people in the prison. Okay, so of course he never shows back up.
This was on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, wasn't it?
Yeah, they just did.
They just
did it on Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
And
wow, fucking crazy.
Yes, the story completely. And see, his dad, Mose, was a preacher in the town that's between where I live and where Jason is in Crestline, Ohio. And of course, he was a pillar of the community, but obviously did everything he could to help his son stay on the run. And and it's been the subject of there was a huge podcast on that. And I mean, it's been the crazy thing.
Yeah.
The crazy thing was a lady was writing a book on all the people who had their death sentences commuted back in the early 80s, I believe. And so she wanted to see how each one of these people's lives had changed for the better, worse, whatever. They had no record of him in the prison system. So when he walked away and escaped, they looked for him for a little bit, but then it just kind of disappeared. Like they kind of said, well, we don't know where he's at, and we're just going to pretend it didn't happen. So
there's a cold case we can work on.
Right there.
I mean, solve cold cases.
But this one's pretty hot for a cold case.
Yeah, it is right now, right? It's like they're really like they've like upped the reward, and they're really trying to like gather tips
and one of the craziest things out of all this was I heard he befriended the members of Earth, Wind, and Fire when he was out in California on the run. And there is it may be an urban legend, but there is a thought that he may have, because he was a painter, designed one of Earth, Wind, and Fire's album covers.
Stop.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I heard that too. I heard that was some kind of a rumor or something. I didn't know it was true.
Yeah, well, the guys in Earth, Wind, and Fire will not speak about it on the record. They will not. They're completely like, we're not talking about this guy. So there you go. So now that I hijacked the whole podcast,
we love all that stuff. We are obsessed with true crime, paranormal. We cover the full spectrum, so it was good that you decided to have us on to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us. You can tell us a little bit more about your background and stuff if you guys want, because I know, Joe, like I said, you're humble and understated, and
truly.
I mean, the mountain of stuff that I found on you was a whole podcast in and of itself.
It wasn't all encrypted, password protected. Come on, I thought I was doing better than that.
No, obviously you're going to have to get your tech guy who set up your phone to do your
there you go.
Cover your track.
There you go.
Okay.
I mean, it's interesting because I work for Rightway. I'm the executive editor at Rightway, and we actually Rightway has our company has two different arms. Rea's in charge of. We have a huge. Our bread and butter is the nonfiction book proposal creation and pitching arm, and then we also do fiction manuscript editing, developmental editing. And the majority of the clients that we have are actually all mostly writing genre or mostly writing stuff that's close to genre. And I mean, like, genre fiction in particular is just like, it is the juice. I mean, literary fiction is like, I'm a long appreciator of books. I love books. I love fiction in particular, but the genre fiction in particular, horror, sci-fi, high fantasy, not only is like where most books are sold and like thrillers like hitting bestseller lists, but I would say like horror genre in particular is experiencing kind of a rad little renaissance. There's like lots of good stuff. There's like lots of great new writers. There's lots of great new female writers putting out some pretty incredible horror fiction. So it's kind of a cool time for this actually, because there's a lot going on, I think.
Yeah, and I've always been interested. I mean, I write more kind of in the thriller genre, but again, my background being, working as a journalist and really always being into true crime. When I started writing fiction, I wanted to skew darker. I wanted to go just super dark, super creepy, and actually maybe even use some real cases that I've read about, worked on. But I quickly realized, at my publishing house, they really want me to stay in that kind of women's fiction / suspense genre versus going really, really dark. So I've actually been toyed with the idea of writing under a pen name and kind of, branching out and going a little bit darker, because I think there's just, as you know, Shane, I mean, there's a universal interest in kind of the paranormal, the things you can't quite answer. Like we just watched, what was it, the Haunting of Bly Manor or something like that?
Yeah.
Some new show on Netflix. And I mean, everything, of course, is horror right now, but I don't know. I think there's just so much room to grow. And again, with most of our fiction clients that we get, we are always dealing with genre. We rarely get literary fiction. We do get a lot of sci-fi, horror, mystery, thriller, science fiction, fantasy. So it's really interesting to see kind of what comes across our desk.
Yeah. Now, do you guys, so for the horror standpoint, what do you see as the vehicle that's driving the horror? Like, is it more? Because to me,
the state of our world.
The state of our world. But amen to that. But like to me, the scariest part of horror is always the stuff that is that walks that line of if it could have really be true, And
for sure.
When somebody like like you take The Shining for instance, and that character slowly going mad, because you can see that happen, or is there more of a supernatural bent, like stuff that maybe has a foot in each world, or something totally fantasy. I don't know.
I think that's an interesting question, and I do, in my opinion, I think it's like pretty diversity, like spread across the board. There's just like a lot, like, and I think one of the things, and I love that Rea brought up that show on Netflix, The Haunting of Bly Manor, because I do think not only are there some horror writers, like young, new horror writers, and writers that have been around for a while, or horror writers that are kind of like largely underappreciated, that are writing some pretty like edgy, out there stuff that covers all the bases you mentioned. But also there's this but there's this like, we're re-honoring the classics again. I mean, that TV show, The Haunting of Bly Manor, is an anthology series. Last season, it was The Haunting of Hill House, inspired by the classic Shirley Jackson novel. And this one is inspired by Henry James' The Turn of the Screw.
That's right.
We're really trying to like recapture those classic. There's a lot of like, there's actually a great book that's coming out or just came out called The Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And it's sort of like she's being compared to a lot of like classic Gothic horror writers. There's this sort of revamping the old, revamping like what made the shit work to begin with. And I think it's super rad. So I think there's just so much shit going on in this genre right now that when I started, I've been doing a lot of reading of classic horror lately, and I was kind of blown away to see how much stuff is coming out right now, where we're really, really grabbing onto this genre and shaking it out for everything it's worth.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to, why don't you go ahead and just each one of you pick out a couple of your favorite things that are out right now, and maybe just kind of throw them out there and give our listeners like an idea of maybe something they should go look at. And I'm writing
these down, by the way, for myself.
Yeah, there's so many books that came out, and Joe and I do a podcast at the top of every month where it's called Coffee and Trades, and we talk about new books that are coming out. But the way that it fell for us this month, we didn't get to talk about any of these horror books or or books in October around Halloween. So this is really fun for us. But there is a book called The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. It actually came out on October 6th. But it's a follow-up to a book called The Twisted Ones. And she really explores the story of Kara, which is a woman who discovers a portal to alternate realities that has like terrifying creatures with the ability to read minds. So a little bit more, kind of out there, but a really great one that came out this month.
No, wait. No, I'm gonna stop you there. You say that's out there. You need to listen to about the last podcast we've done. That's the we're gonna have to go check that one out, Jason, because doesn't that sound like what is going on in the world right now?
It does. It's scarily similar.
I mean, we keep getting guests on, and there's physicists that truly believe that we are rubbing up against the alternate reality that, whatever
100%,
is that it's being torn open, and that some of the stuff that people are experiencing is stuff that's coming back and forth between these dimensions, and to have somebody, that's fantastic. That's a great, Rea, you must have done your homework. That's a great book to.
Yeah,
I've always been interested in portals. I feel like I just want to go through a portal. That's been my theme of 2020. I'm like, can I step into another reality and like just escape this one right now? Because
you talk about cold cases too. There's the theoretical principle that a lot of the cold cases that exist, like missing persons, people that have gone out hiking in Joshua Tree National Park and never seen from again, decades later, actually are, stepping into portals and not returning. So,
yes. David Paulides has done a lot of stuff on that. And that's one of his theories is, how can somebody, when you're in a group hiking, how can you turn your head for 30 seconds and somebody literally disappear? And just there's no trace of anything. And gosh,
portals, baby.
If I'm going through portals, I'm just ending up in the same place. That's all.
I love like reading about that, writing about that, just the whole disappearance thing. I mean, that was my first novel. It's about a kidnapping and just disappearances in general. I think are the most like universally interesting stories to read about, to tell, to research, because there's just that collective, wanting to know what happened and not being able to, that I think keeps people so interested.
Yeah, that's why we watch Dateline every Friday night, because it's just like, what? Because and you're right. It is. It's like it seems like we're in a time in the world's history where we seem to know everything, and then everything is on a camera, a phone. It's all collected. Yeah. But then how do people just disappear? How does that happen? And it's
portals.
The more that we keep people aware of it, the more that we keep people aware of it, I think the more people are going to be on the lookout. Eventually, we're going to have some credible witnesses that's going to verify and say, yes, I seen this person go into this ball of light or something along those lines. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah. You guys are like the new generation of like Coast to Coast AM. You guys are like the new George Norrie, man.
That is the best compliment we have ever had. You are welcome back on this program anytime you want to. We will clear the slate to allow you to come back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I do mean it. You guys are bringing that information to the masses.
Joe, what you don't know is that Jason has a poster of George Norrie on his wall.
No.
And
I went all the way. Remember, I went to meet him and to hang out at a meet and greet with him. He's a great guy, man.
Oh, the captain, man. That is fantastic.
Yes.
Oh my God. I used to listen when I first moved to LA. This was 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, when I would get done bartending, 1:30 in the morning, I would always listen on my way to an all-night diner. I would always listen to Coast to Coast in my car driving, and I loved it. I loved every second of it.
I've been a Coast Insider for about 12 years now.
I am honored to be on this call with you, my friend.
Thank you. Same here.
Rea, I think that you and I should maybe hang up and let them have some time to themselves.
Yes, right. Have some quality time.
Jeez. So what other great other great books are out now that might interest? Because I mean, you like that one is, I think, is going to be a fit. I can't wait for our first listeners to go check that out and let us know that they read that.
Absolutely.
I would reiterate, I think Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia is definitely worth the pickup. It's getting a lot of good press, and it definitely has sort of like a really interesting cultural niche. The other one too that sort of like has that cultural niche in the same vein is a novella called Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. He writes that's his pseudonym, but he's actually also a historian. But he's got this book is basically a horror book about the Ku Klux Klan, and it came out just the beginning of this month, maybe beginning of October. But it's about literal monsters, demon carnivores within the Ku Klux Klan that are sort of rounding out the racists in the group. So it's definitely like a great horror novel, and then also a commentary on what's happening in our country right now. So I think super worth to pick up both of those.
Oh yeah, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
There's I love that this one. It's a collection of essays, but it's called Be Scared of Everything by Peter Counter. So it's a collection of essays on the horror genre, and so it kind of blends criticism and memoir and the kind of importance and humor of the horror genre in general. So a little bit more, it's just kind of step-by-step look inside of the horror genre. But this one is Elegy for the Undead by Matthew Vesely. It also came out like mid-October. But it's a zombie novella about two newlywed husbands who navigate the world when they only have a short time left together. So this is like totally left field. Like I don't feel like you hear a lot of or read about a lot of zombie novellas that have like two newlywed husbands. So I thought that was kind of cool, like something totally different you don't hear about every day.
I was going to say that is probably a first that I've
Same here. That's an original take right there.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about this genre, because again, we deal so much with having to fit inside this neat little box with certain genre fiction, and there are rules that do apply. And I feel like with this genre, you can stretch a little bit, you can play around and explore, and the rules aren't set in stone. The publishers who tend to publish genre fiction as well can take more risks and chances than some of like the big five publishers where you do have to fit in this neat little box. So that's
absolutely
so cool to be a genre writer. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, like this in particular, like the horror genre, and maybe definitely more so than sci-fi. It's a genre that really lends itself to like to being reimagined in new generations. The idea of a zombie horror novel featuring a gay couple is like it's putting like teaching an old dog a new trick. Whereas a lot of other genres that might be more tied to place or time, horror really is not, and it really lends itself to new generations of writers reimagining what it can do and what it can say for our particular place in time. which is like the best part.
Yeah, I definitely, because the monster can always be the same, but the circumstances and different background can change. I mean, because you could still put Dracula, you could put the Wolfman in any sort of
environment
setting, and have 100 different stories based on but the horror, the true horror, is still the same, except that maybe the twist is how the really horrifying creature takes whatever new technology or new setting and uses it to their advantage that you wouldn't normally think about. So.
I totally. In fact, there's a book that came out in November by a writer he's got 2 books out this year. It's called Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. He is a great horror writer. I can't recommend him enough. So he's got this Night of the Mannequins came out in November. It's a punchy little, like, more like current, kind of funny, gory horror romp. But he had another book that came out earlier this year called The Only Good Indians, which is a kind of monster in it's a follow horror where a group of kids are being stalked by, essentially the boogeyman in a lot of ways, or whatever the boogeyman manifests itself as in that book. But that is a particular horror trope that works time and time again on so many levels, and it definitely speaks to each generation, speaks to individual people as that, shape in the dark that is haunting us, trailing us, following us, tracking us. Whether it's because we committed some kind of a sin or misdeed or went someplace we weren't supposed to go or did something we weren't supposed to do. That is one of those perfect, the epitome of horror tropes that just can repeat itself and repeat itself and repeat itself and never get old.
I agree. And also, horror does its job. I mean, it helps people regardless of what generation you come from, how many retellings you have, adding the nuances of a newer generation. It does its job by it makes people appreciate the reality that they're in.
Truly.
Absolutely.
Well said. Yeah. Totally.
We recently, we have an 8-year-old daughter who hates horror, anything scary. She's like, nope, can't do it. But she was at my parents' house, and my husband and I watched the original Halloween because I'd never actually seen it.
That's the best one ever.
It is so.
1978.
I was blown away by the slow burn because not that much happens in that movie, but the difference is today where we have so many gimmicks and gore and blood and violence and all this stuff, but the anticipation was the scariest thing of all. And I don't know, it was just so masterfully done. And I feel like, especially with visual, anything in the visual world today, we're so stimulated all the time. There's so much noise, there's so much distraction, and sometimes we think bigger is scarier. And I don't know, it was just such a wonderfully done film, and I wish I wish we'd kind of go back to.
Well, I wish they would have stopped at Halloween 2.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Well, it was great. It's a great franchise. It really is.
Well, but okay. Well, Jason, you and I just were on a podcast where we discussed Jason X. I mean, come on. All right.
Yes, we did. But I agree with Rea also, and I think that was masterfully done, and they did that on a shoestring budget. And it was one of the best.
That's what I said. I was like, this is the cheapest film ever. And it's so well done.
Absolutely.
But that's the lesson. That's the lesson there too, right? Is look how much you can really get done. And maybe we need to on a lot of horror films, not to get totally off subject, but maybe we need to rein in some of those budgets so that a lot of these, you had our tour horror directors who were making making movies for nothing, making movies for pennies compared to now. And so they, you know, there wasn't a lot extra to do. I just watched, speaking of horror, I sorry to interrupt, but speaking of horror, I just watched Rebecca, the remake of Hitchcock's Rebecca. Which the you know, that movie, you know, based on the Daphne du Maurier, famous Daphne du Maurier story, is a sort of about a haunting of sorts, absolutely. But you know, I think about the original, and you know, of course you cite Hitchcock, and it's like, well, obviously the dude was a master, but it won the Oscar. It was really, really well done, and they really focused. They had to, because of the times and because of the budget, and because filmmaking didn't include all of the technology that it does now, all the flourish. They relied solely on the only methods they had for storytelling. You know, camera cuts, lighting, sound, performances, and that was it. And the new version that's out on Netflix, and not to disparage it, but it's very, for all that it incorporates a lot of like CGI flourish of these dream sequences that weren't actually included in the, I think in the original, even in the original IP or even the Hitchcock version, but like all of this extra stuff. And for all of that extra, the movie is shockingly flat, shockingly like, so you have all this money and you have all these tools, all these extra tools that you maybe don't need, and you're still not telling the story as well as someone who was working with less, you know?
And here's the common, to nail that point home, is that, you know, when we talk to people and they tell us their stories, okay, whether it's like a ghost story or somebody saw, you know, or thinks they heard something in the woods or whatever, there's not like big explosions and a light show and something coming through with a chainsaw, you know? It's not big. It's not big budget, you know. You're sitting there and you hear a noise or you see something out of the corner of your eye. It's just the subtle things that really scare you, and then it's the idea of, you know, being home alone, or is there somebody out there that you can't see, or is there something following you in the woods, or it's just the little things that are the scariest. Because they can be, you know, just like you said, the big budget stuff. I mean, I never heard anybody say, oh gosh, this really well costume clown came through the, you know, it's just the little subtle things that are the scariest. I mean, if I looked out the back window right now and saw a guy in a Carhartt jumpsuit and a melted William Shatner mask, I'd be a little bit scared. I'd be scared. You know?
So I used to be horrified of Freddy Krueger, of course, as a kid, child of the 80s, and my brother got that mask, and you know, back then we would run around lawless. I mean, just at night. My friend lived about 5-10 minutes away. So I would often sneak out and go to her house, and I had to pass this yard with like a 3-legged dog and this creepy man sitting in a lawn chair. But my brother one night like snuck out and had that mask on, and I was running to my friends, and he just appeared behind a tree. And I swear to God, to this day, I will not rewatch those movies because that scared me so completely. It's just that idea of being chased and going to sleep. And I've always, since I was little, like just seen things and seen images and seen people in different rooms in different homes that we've lived in. And one time in Chicago, when my husband and I lived in Chicago, I mean, it was nightly. Like I would see things flying around and just this awful energy. And we started researching the building, and it was a slaughterhouse. And there were butcher marks all over in our bedroom was like the worst room. And I don't know, it's just so crazy. I know we're going to talk about that later, but yeah, just picking up those energies, pretty creepy.
I mean, I think that's such a good point though, is like, isn't that what makes, I mean, if this is sort of like, if you can like, if we think of like a horror stories, it's like, horror fiction is like the tale around the campfire. Like, isn't that part of it? Is like how we relate to it, or do we relate to it, or like, in certain do certain stories, horror stories or supernatural stories, make us either think of an event or something that happened to us, or doesn't it elicit our imagination where we could imagine what that would be like? That's like, the really well done horror fiction, the really well done horror films, all sort of have that same effect on us, where all of a sudden you're watching Halloween and like you're watching, Laurie Strode get chased all over the house, and you start looking over your own shoulder.
You're absolutely right, Joe. I agree with you. You were spot on. That's what makes, when you get those elements brought together, that is what makes a good horror movie. Yes.
Well,
there
is nothing more terrifying than what you can conjure up in your own mind.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And if you could just plant the seed of a possibility and let the person, the viewer, the reader, whoever, grow that horror or that terror within themselves, it's better, because what scares you may not necessarily, what visually scares you may not scare me, but it's what we don't see and what we can imagine is going to scare us the worst. And the people that can do that, and we'll go back to Halloween, where I'm talking about when Jamie Lee Curtis looks out the window at school and there's Michael Myers standing by his car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man.
And she looks away and he's still there, and then looks away and he's still there. Then he's not. And it's like, well, a normal horror movie, he'd been gone after the first time. Okay.
Yep.
But it's like those two more beats where he's still there. Now where is he at? Where'd he go?
Well, where is he at? That is the ultimate question.
Is he in the school? Did he drive? Did he go to McDonald's? What's he doing?
See, she was hit after that. That was it, right? See, she was all screwed up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, let's face it, Jamie Lee Curtis is a child of Hollywood. She might have been screwed up anyway.
Well, I'm just saying, a situation like that, her imagination is running wild, and she can't think and function after that. Her thoughts is, where is her brother? Where is Michael Myers?
Yeah.
That's true horror. It's sort of like using that kind of a formula individualizes the horror to each fan that's watching the movie. Yes.
So what did you got? So each one of you got, you guys are obviously avid readers. What's your go-to scary book? Like what's like your comfort food? Like what's one of your all-time favorites that you could always go back and reread it if you had to?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, this isn't typical horror, but to me, it just stands in my mind. But it's actually Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's such a haunting book with this, Margaret, who's the main character. She can't escape the ghost of her past, or the literal ghost of her dead baby, who's known as Beloved. And it is such a haunting tale, and the way that she writes, I don't know, to me that's always been one of my favorite books, and again, not maybe typical horror, but it definitely stuck with me, just the lingering after effects of it.
Yeah, Rea actually contributed to Glamour magazine, asked a bunch of writers what their favorite horror book was, and I was delighted to see that you chose that, because I think that it needs to regularly be included among those other titles, because it is such a great ghost story. Oh my God.
It is such a great ghost story. It's so haunting.
So what about you, Joe? What's your go-to?
I am currently rereading, and I think my go-to is actually The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I just think she was definitely a writer who did her homework on, and it definitely doesn't qualify. It doesn't necessarily qualify. I mean, I guess it qualifies as horror as a genre, but the emotion that she was looking to elicit was not horror but terror. And I do think that it is one of those books where it's such a, you can so see yourself. You can so relate to the characters because she examines, in particular, the main characters so closely, and she so did her homework on what the tropes were, and she was able to kind of circumvent it for, I think, a wholly original, but then what ultimately became the defining ghost story of the last 30 years, 40 years at least.
Yeah, and can I add, what I remember being terrified by a book. The first book that just really kept me up at night was D.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. That book was so terrifying to me, and I read it when I was way too young, because it dealt with such adult themes. But again, it was just the thought in my head of what could happen and what can happen to children specifically, when you're a child and thinking like you're protected and everything's fine. But I remember being so haunted by that book and again, wanting to kind of still return to it year after year, which is so fascinating to me. What we're terrified by, we still want to kind of return to and dive into and research more.
Well, you actually oddly kind of hope you have that feeling again, right? Like I remember when I was probably too young to read Stephen King's The Dark Half, and I remember kind of wanting to go back to revisit it to try to re-feel the same pure fright, like the same pure anxiety and fear and that I had the first time, because there is even though it's, I don't know, we paint these responses as somehow negative, but don't we? I love that feeling of like suspense or like waiting for something to jump out from around the corner, or that image that I can't get out of my head.
Houses.
Exactly.
Did anyone go to haunted houses? Like, no, my husband will not go to a haunted house with me now, but I mean, that used to be my thing. I would go to all the haunted houses.
Yeah, me too. I try to hit them every season.
Well, when I was a kid, there was one we went to that they were using real chainsaws. They broke a friend of mine's kneecap, like inside the slaughterhouse. It got completely shut down. It was all over.
That is actually just assault.
It was,
Talk about a true crime. Talk about a true crime.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it right there.
Yeah. Yep. There you go.
I was going to say that the first book that really frightened me and scared me, and I was able to relive it year after year, was the math textbook I got in second grade. And every year after that, I got a math.
That'll do it.
To me, I was like, "Oh my God, this is horror." But Flowers in the Attic, I remember walking out of that movie when it became a movie, and I was like, "This is terrible." I didn't read the book.
It's inappropriate.
But I'm like, "What?" Yeah, I'm like, how am I supposed to feel as I walk out of this movie? Because this is just so wrong on so many levels. And,
so many levels, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I know what you're saying, but yeah, when I was a kid, I loved, and you guys are way younger than me, so
How old are you?
I won't even tell you how old I'm going to be Friday.
Oh, come on.
The day before. I'll be the big 50 on Friday.
Wow!
Hey.
Congratulations! You're not that much older than us.
Yeah, well, just
awesome.
go ahead. Just go ahead and say. Yeah, I'm a lot older. Yeah, it's fine. But like I was always I like the fiction stuff, but I always loved the weekly reader stuff that we used to get, like the Scholastic book orders that you could.
Oh yes.
Did you guys get those in school?
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Every time there was a ghost one, a Bigfoot one, a Loch Ness Monster one, anything, a Bermuda Triangle. I ordered it, and I would just, the next for 99 cents maybe, and the next week I'm just devour it, because that's all we had back then were books. There was no looking stuff up on the internet. There was no podcast. There was even stuff on television for that stuff. And so that, as a kid, that's how I got because I was more into, do these things really exist somewhere? Somebody's seeing these things, and they're not here in Crawford County, Ohio. So hopefully I'm safe. But then you come to find out they are here, and they're everywhere.
Well, remember, all we had as a kid was In Search of with Leonard Nimoy.
In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. See, these guys don't even know who Leonard Nimoy is.
That is not true.
That's Mr. Spock from Star Trek. Everybody knows that, Shane.
Remember we were talking about Star Trek to somebody, and we had to clarify that they were referring to the Next Generation.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was Stacy Brown, Skunk Ape expert. Yes.
Yeah, Stacy Brown.
Have you guys watched the new Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix?
I watched 3 or 4.
I haven't yet either.
Totally worth it. Totally worth it. So cool.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome that they brought that back. That was such a great show.
I know. What a classic. I mean, again, like classic formula. Like, talk about shit that we all desperately want to know.
Yep. Now, Joe, now from listening to you guys' podcast, you are attempting to write a horror screenplay? Am I right, or a horror book? Which is it?
Actually, yeah, I'm working on a horror book that is either smartly or stupidly about being quarantined.
So you're gonna be the first one in the pool? Is that what we're saying?
I'm trying to lead the pack here in COVID fiction.
Yes,
hey,
God.
Listen, I'm seeing right now the merchandising possibilities are like the masks with the
endless.
Oh my God! Right?
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic.
I mean, come on. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to ask you guys before we let you guys go, like, what are you guys got any good supernatural stories of your own that aren't fiction? And Rea, you already started telling us the awful crazy thing that went on in your bedroom in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean that's about the extent of it. It's always at night and in different houses and really seeing. I mean, ever since I was a kid, just really being able to sense presences and see different, shapes and things hovering over my bed. But beyond that, no, like I've never had just like a true encounter during the day. Have you, Joe?
Yeah, not during the day. I have, and I'm definitely, my mind is open to those kind of suggestions. I'm a huge extraterrestrial nut. I'm one of these guys who's sitting around waiting for government disclosure.
So am I.
Like, I am like,
how much more government? How much more government disclosure do we need? They just admitted in June we have UFOs in our possession.
Truly, but apparently there is much more material that Harry Reid said. There's much more material that they're still not releasing.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yep.
Well, my conclusion is that somebody was driving those UFOs. Okay, that
there we go.
The off-world vehicles that we possess. Somebody was manning those or flying them, and so like that came out in June, and nobody paid any attention to it.
It was crazy. I couldn't.
That's how crazy the world is. Right? Nobody cares.
Yeah, people are more concerned about the COVID crisis.
Truly,
yeah,
truly. But I did have a paranormal experience. When I was very young, I grew up in a very eerie house on Holmes Street in Janesville, Wisconsin. And I saw a figure in my bedroom in the middle of the night. I remember it very distinctly. I remember screaming and the figure dissipating. There was no light or shadow in the room. It was clearly to me, as clear a figure, an actual corporeal figure standing in my bedroom is what I remember seeing. And during that time that we lived in this house, my mother also experienced a broad range of like classic events. Rea, you mentioned like figures floating above her while she was in bed. Every time my dad was out of town for work, she would hear, she would be totally awake and hear footsteps coming up the staircase. She would wake up in the middle of the night and be unable to move. Just like a lot of like insane sort of classic poltergeist style events, objects moving, cabinet doors that were open being suddenly closed or vice versa, like just a broad range of shit. And honest to God, since we moved out of that house, which this was many, many years ago, once we left that house, I never experienced anything in any home or apartment I've ever lived in since.
Oh God! And that reminds me.
Wow.
I didn't say this, but reminds me. So the house we lived in, we just moved into a new house 2 years ago, but we lived in a rental a couple of years ago on this street. So we moved in. And we kind of knew the history before we moved in, but I started developing all of these weird heart issues, like weird palpitations. I ended up in the ER twice, like didn't know what was going on. And the man who lived there before died of a heart attack in our bedroom.
What?
And he was Googling heart issues when he dropped dead of a heart attack. So then we started digging a little bit more into the street, and there were 3 murders on that street. There was a hanging across the street. There was a man who murdered his family and then, of course, killed himself. And there was another man who committed suicide. And this is all on our same street. So I wanted to dig and see, like, are we on a burial ground? Like, what's the history here? Our house got hit by lightning twice.
What? That might be
was
the most amazing thing right there.
It was insane. Within a week, it killed like our tree. My daughter was there. It caught fire. Like, it was the craziest thing to witness. But there was such a dark, sinister energy in that house. And I remember waking up one night and there was this man like literally lunging at me, and I flew backwards over my husband, scared him to death, like scrambled over the bed, and he didn't disappear. He was just there. And I don't know if it was the guy who died or whatever, but I was like, we have to get out of this house. We were also sick. Like all 3 of us would get a lot of respiratory infections and just sick in this house.
Whoa.
It had such a horrible energy. So that's changed a lot since we've left. But the whole heart issue and the heart attack thing, that just blew me away. I was like, we literally got to get out of this house or I'm going to die here. It was awful.
Like my jaw is hanging because I mean, hey, I hate to break it to you, Joe. There's your movie right there.
Yeah.
There's the movie.
Totally.
Like this super successful author moves into this seemingly unassuming neighborhood and discovers the darkness there.
Yeah.
That would actually be really fun. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Yeah, seriously, you were living at like the crossroads of the mortal planes.
And on this same street. So get this: our neighbors just moved, so they moved away from there as well. But right before they moved, there was this guy going around who was called the Hatchet Man, and he was walking around with a hatchet and breaking into people's houses during the middle of the day. I was like, but was he like murdering people? And he wasn't. But I was like, what is going on this street? There is something super sinister about this street.
It sure sounds like it.
What was the name of the street?
It's called Grame or Gramey, Graeme. No one could ever pronounce it right.
I thought she was going to say Elm Street for a minute.
Yeah, Elm Street. Oh man, that would be the best.
See, if she had any sense of comic timing, that's what she would have done. But,
yeah, exactly.
Yep. She'd been like Elm Street. We'd been like, no.
Elm Street.
I'm just kidding. It's Anderson Court. No big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the name of the street might be something really catchy you could use as a title, but if you can't pronounce it, then that's
exactly.
That's a no-go.
Yep.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, that's wild. That's crazy.
Wow.
God damn.
That's like
I love it.
Like the possibility.
I don't ever get to talk about that either, so that's fun.
I don't even know. That's mind-blowing. I can't believe it.
I know. You don't even know any of that, Joe, but yeah.
So,
I know.
So talk about like the negative energy in that neighborhood with all that stuff going on. I mean, I wonder if you research that neighborhood, that I'll bet your wave of stuff is not the first wave of stuff that has gone on.
I completely agree, and I mean, now that we're talking about this, I'm like, yeah, why don't I do some more digging and kind of see what I come up with, because it's too coincidental to have that many incidents on one street. So yeah, really tracing it back to see what was there and what all happened.
If you do,
super cool.
Make sure you check in with us so you come back on the air and tell us about it.
I will.
Check in and make sure that you're still okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, our listeners will want to know. Well, she never came back. Is she all right?
Yeah.
I mean, Joe, if the next thing she hands you the edit of hers, it just says, "All work and no play makes Rea a dull girl."
Oh my God! I mean,
God.
I ruined it, Rea. That I should have told you that afterwards. Turn that in. Give it
immediately to Nashville to save her husband and her daughter because Rea has gone insane.
Wow, that is fantastic. Well, hey guys, we've kept you long enough, but I know Jason appreciates you guys jumping on.
Very much so.
Yes. You guys gave us some great insight to some great books. I mean, I'm going to go check out a couple. Although I'm not going to go read anything about mannequins coming to life. That whole
well, don't be deceived. I think there's a super interesting premise there that you might actually like. So.
Oh no! See, that just sounds like a setup right there.
I'm totally baiting you. I'm luring you into the trap. Absolutely.
Yes. Now, Jason, the only thing that was missing from this was a book review on the From the Shadows book series. I was totally, thought maybe they would.
Oh man.
Yeah.
They were going to come out and say, this great new writer, go out and read this book.
Everybody should purchase that book. Yes, we need to have you on our podcast, and then you can.
Yeah, we'll write. Yeah.
There you go, Shane.
Well, it'll be just a complete disappointment for everybody involved. But but I can't express to our listeners enough. If you guys want to learn the ins and outs of just putting your idea down on paper, just even start with, all the way through to finishing a book, finishing a screenplay, getting it out there to the world to see. These are the guys, Joe and Rea. Go listen to their podcast. It's super interesting, especially if you're like a geek like me that is into the technical back stories on how to do stuff. What they do, like you guys do that, the interesting at the beginning of the month, you guys do book reviews and talk about what's coming out, and you guys are such cool people, just period. I mean, you guys keep it. There's no like stuffy shirts and
no, that's not.
We pride ourselves on that.
Yes, and if any listeners are interested in just like, I want to write a book, but I don't really know what I want to do or what my goals are, we do offer 30-minute free consults to just hop on Zoom, hop on the phone, and just talk through your options, because that's our main goal here, is just informing authors to make inspired and informed decisions about their career, and just empowering them with the right information so they know what to do, they know how it works, they know how to get their work out there. So they can always go to our website, writewayco.com. It has all of that information. And that's writewayco.com. But we're always happy to just chat and kind of help you figure out what you want to do.
That is great. Now that is really great. That's some good information right there. I'm sure our listeners would love to do that. Yes.
Yeah. And if any of our listeners had a story idea about being quarantined, sorry, Joe's already.
Yeah,
I've already taken it. Don't even bother.
But hey, guys,
kidding. I would never.
Thanks so much for coming on, spending some time and classing up the joint a little bit. Because we enjoy, and I hope and I encourage all of our listeners to not only go check out the titles that you guys talked about and read them for themselves, or that we are getting into the holiday season. Maybe you can
Book makes a great gift. Book makes a great gift.
Yes, they do.
Right.
And then while you're looking up Rea, look up her books. Rea, you're gonna. Let's give you a chance.
You got to plug this book.
Yeah, plug your book.
So I mean, it's kind of it's not horror, but kind of worst case scenario. It's called Until I Find You. It just came out in August, but it's about a blind widow who believes her 3-month-old son Jackson has been swapped for another baby, but no one will believe her. So a little bit of the changeling, mythology going on in there, but yeah, just kind of a mother's worst case scenario of thinking her baby's been swapped for another child. But
that sounds absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's very scary in itself.
Actually, yeah, she's underselling the horror of the book itself.
It
definitely fits the genre.
I was expecting this to be Until I Find You, the Lester Eubanks story.
There you go. Exactly.
But yeah. So like I said at the opening, Rea is a best-selling author, and no matter what the list is, she's a best-selling author on our list for sure. So go check out her newest book, Until I Find You, and then you got a couple other titles. You want to tell everybody else about those?
I do, yeah. So Not Her Daughter was my debut, came out in 2018, but it's about a woman who kidnaps a 5-year-old to save her from her abusive mother. So kind of a reverse play on kidnapping for good, if there is such a thing. So again, got that disappearance element. And then my second book is called Because You're Mine, and it's harder to sum up, but there's some kind of worst case scenario on what happens if a parent dies and leaves a child without a guardian. You can sense a theme here. There's a lot of like mother-child things going on, but I really like to explore kind of a parent's worst nightmare and making it feel like it could happen to you. And
so has your writing changed since you moved off the real Elm Street then? I mean, because it seems like
seriously. Well, it's funny. Yeah, I wrote my first 2 books there, ironically. And then, it actually has changed a little bit. I have to say the energy is totally different in this house compared to that house. So, not quite as all doom and gloom. So.
Wow. Well, everybody go check out Rea Fry's page on Amazon and get some of those books. I mean, they sound great. They sound absolutely terrifying, and I can't wait till they're made into movies. So anybody that any of our movie producer friends that are listening out there, go check out Rea's stuff, because I think that's some of those are great premises for a movie. And then, Joe, is there any place we can go check your stuff out, or are you just going to keep being humble and understated?
Humble and understated. It's sort of my go-to. Definitely check us out check out our website at writewayco. And I have a small creative concern called the Hat Beard Company. We also put out some podcasts and have done some obviously live production, storytelling events, and so forth. That website is htbrd.com. And obviously we're not doing so much live stuff anymore, but definitely check out writewayco.com. And if you do have the yen to write a book or have written a book and just don't know what to do next, definitely hit us up for that 30-minute consult.
That's great. And I think this pandemic that we've gone through, I think a lot of people have probably started to write that book that they have put off.
Yes, they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So,
Yep. Totally.
So don't sit around and do nothing with it. Go look up Rea and
No,
Joe
I
and
mean,
get the ball rolling.
Absolutely, because
Yeah, if you're not
that's the
gonna do it
problem with a
now.
lot of people. They have a good idea, but they don't know how to get started. So that's why I was saying earlier, this
Yeah.
consultation, this 30-minute consultation, spot on. That's A1 right there.
Well, I mean, and we talk about it all the time that over 80% of people want to write books, and there's only 40,000 published authors in the world. So there's a huge disconnect there. And
Right.
so many people want to write books, but we are really in the business of helping you put out that finished product, whether it is self-publishing, traditional publishing, but just getting it done. Books don't write themselves.
Well, that's outstanding. That's
Now
outstanding.
is the time.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks again, and we're going to be looking forward to some other projects coming out from you guys so we can tell everybody about them. So.
Yeah, and Rea, if you
Definitely.
find out
Thank you guys
anything
again.
about that property you used to stay in, make sure you keep in touch with us and let us know.
Oh, I will. I definitely will. I will check in regularly.
Great.
All right. And Joe, if you run into George Norrie out there, give him Jason's number.
Absolutely.
I absolutely will. I'll tell him his old buddy said hello.
That's right.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Take
Thank you
care.
so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.